Picture a dark temple before dawn. No torches, no choir, no incense rising yet. Just the cold patience of stone and the sense that something is waiting behind the walls. Something that doesn't move until you look at it. That's attention. Not the casual kind. Not the distracted glance that schemes a screen and forgets. I mean attention as a force. A beam. A spotlight that doesn't merely notice the world, but selects which parts of the world get to happen inside you. And what happens inside you, given enough repetition, starts arranging what happens outside. This is the part people miss when they say, where your attention goes, your life goes. They treat it like a motivational slogan, something you put on a sticky note. But in the old mythic language, where gods weren't distant celebrities but living principles, attention is one of the most dangerous tools a human being can hold. It is the difference between being moved and moving, between being written and writing. Thoth's sharpest lesson isn't delivered like a gentle teacher. It's delivered like a blade. Not to harm you, no. To cut away what is foggy. To separate what is true from what is merely loud. Because if you can't control where your attention goes, you don't really have a life. You have a set of reactions. You have a string pulled by invisible hands. You have a mind that thinks it's choosing while it's being guided. And the cruelest part is that it feels normal. It feels like just living. But Thoth, the scribe, the measurer, the one who weighs language like gold dust, would tell you, your attention is not passive. It is not a window. It is not a mirror. It is a creative instrument. It is the lamp that makes a shape appear in the darkness, and then convinces you that the shape existed first, and the lamp came second. Watch how it works in your own mind. Think about a day you were anxious. Not catastrophically, just that low, buzzing anxiety that makes your body tight and your thoughts sharp. On those days, doesn't the world seem different? The same streets, the same people, the same sky, yet somehow everything feels slightly threatening, slightly impatient, slightly wrong. You read neutral faces as judgment. You interpret pauses as rejection. You hear a casual comment as criticism. What changed? The outer world, or the inner beam? You did not merely witness reality. You tuned it, like a radio that decides which station will fill the room. Anxiety is one frequency. Desire is another. Gratitude another. Resentment another. And attention, your attention, is the dial you keep turning without realizing your hand is on it. Now if you can tune reality unconsciously, you can tune it consciously. This is where the grandeur begins. And also where the responsibility begins, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. You will realize that most of what you call my life is the sum of what you repeatedly illuminated. Not what you wanted once. Not what you promised yourself in a burst of inspiration. Not what you daydreamed about on a good night. What you fed, what you returned to again and again, like a pilgrim returning to the same shrine. And here is the first razor-edged secret. Attention is devotion. It may not look like devotion. It may look like doom scrolling. It may look like replaying an argument. It may look like obsessing over someone who doesn't love you back. It may look like comparing your life to strangers. It may look like rehearsing the future's worst outcomes as if panic were preparation. But devotion is simply what you repeatedly offer your inner altar. The mind is a temple whether you call it that or not. And every day, all day, you're placing offerings on that altar. Some offerings are sweet. Some are poisonous. Many are unconscious. Thoth's lesson begins with a question that seems too simple to be mystical. What are you worshiping with your attention? Because whatever you consistently worship becomes your world. If you worship lack, you become fluent in what is missing. If you worship fear, you become skilled at detecting danger. If you worship resentment, your memory becomes an archive of betrayals. If you worship distraction, your inner life becomes fragmented, bright shards that never form a whole mirror. And if you worship what is true, what is meaningful, what is life-giving, then life begins to answer you with the same language. But there's another layer, a deeper one, the one Thoth would smile at because it's the kind of truth that doesn't care whether you believe it. Your attention doesn't only select what you experience. It trains what you become able to experience. Over time, attention is education. The mind learns what to notice. The nervous system learns what to anticipate. The heart learns what to expect. And then you call that expectation reality, even though it's largely your own training. A person who has trained their attention on betrayal will notice betrayal everywhere, even where it isn't. A person trained on beauty will find beauty in cracked sidewalks and tired faces. A person trained on problems will see life as a series of fires to put out. A person trained on meaning will see life as a series of signals, invitations, lessons. Not because the world changes for them, though sometimes it will, but because the world they can perceive becomes different. This is why attention is power. Not power in the cartoon sense of controlling others, but power in the older sense. The capacity to shape your inner universe so that your outer life begins to match it, slowly and inevitably, like water carving stone. Thoth is often depicted with the head of an ibis, the bird with a long, curved beak, as if his face is shaped to probe into hidden places. He is associated with writing, measurement, time, and balance. These aren't random traits. They're the vocabulary of precision, of not being fooled by appearances, of noticing what's actually there. And the first thing Thoth would measure in you is not your talent, not your potential, not your intentions. He would measure your attention, because attention is your currency, and you're always spending it. Spend on trivialities and you will feel poor, no matter how much you own. Spend it on what enlarges your spirit, and you will feel rich, even before anything improves. Spend it on fear, and you will live in a narrow corridor. Spend it on growth, and you will live in an expanding sky. This is not poetic exaggeration. It is psychological mechanics. Modern psychology gives this ancient truth different names. It talks about selective attention, how your brain filters billions of bits of data and lets only a small portion become conscious experience. It talks about confirmation bias, how you notice what supports your beliefs and miss what contradicts them. It talks about neuroplasticity, how repeated focus rewires the brain. But Thoth's teaching is older and sharper. The mind becomes the shape of what it repeatedly attends to. And then life follows. Not always instantly, not always neatly, not always in the way you fantasize, but in the way that a river follows a groove, in the way that habits become identity, in the way that identity becomes choice, in the way that choice becomes consequence. So here's a quiet experiment, not a dramatic ritual, something simple enough that it almost insults the mind's love of complexity. Think of the last week of your life. Where did your attention go? Most often, not where you wish it went, not where you think it should go, where it actually went. In those unguarded moments when no one is watching, in the pauses between tasks, in the space before sleep, in the silence after a conversation, in the morning when you first open your eyes. Did it go to worry? Did it go to regret? Did it go to a person? Did it go to the future? Did it go to your phone like a reflex? Did it go to old wounds and old stories? Did it go to your body with gentleness or only with criticism? Now don't judge the answer. Judgment is another distraction, another way to keep the beam spinning in circles. Just notice, because noticing is the first reclaiming. A spotlight can be hijacked, yes. It can also be returned. And this is what makes Thoth's lesson both terrifying and liberating. Nobody can steal your life without first stealing your attention. And nobody can give you your life back except you, by reclaiming the beam. It's terrifying because it means you can't blame your way into freedom. You can't point at the world and say, "This is why I am this way," without also realizing you have been feeding the very thing that feeds on you. But it's liberating because attention is always available. Even if your circumstances can't change yet. Even if the past can't be rewritten. Even if the future is uncertain. Your attention, this moment, right now, can be redirected. And that redirection is not a small thing. It is the turning of the key in the lock. If you want to understand why this is so sharp, imagine a scribe in an ancient hall. He sits with a reed pen. Before him is a scroll. Whatever he writes becomes official. Whatever he writes becomes history. He does not write everything. He writes what he deems important. He writes what is selected. Your attention is that scribe. And life, in many ways, is the scroll. Whatever you repeatedly mark with ink becomes the record you live inside. The mind begins to treat it as law. The body begins to align with it. The choices begin to orbit it. When you keep writing danger, you live in a world of danger. When you keep writing not enough, you live in a world of scarcity. When you keep writing I'm late, you live chased by time. When you keep writing I'm unlovable, you filter love out even when it's offered. But when you begin writing different words, carefully, patiently, your inner world changes first. And then your outer world starts to follow, because you start making different choices without forcing them. You start seeing different opportunities without hunting them. You start feeling different emotions without faking them. This is the sacred mechanics behind what looks like self-help. And it's also why it must be handled with reverence. Because the sharpest lesson of Thoth is not think positive. That's childish and thin. Thoth doesn't deal in cheerfulness. He deals in truth. His lesson is, your attention is your spell. It's what you chant all day without realizing your lips are moving. And every spell has a consequence. So if you're tired of your life feeling scattered, chaotic, heavy, or dull, don't begin by trying to overhaul everything. Don't begin by demanding an instant rebirth. That is the ego's addiction to drama. Begin by turning the beam, just a few degrees. Begin by noticing where it goes when you're not guarding it. Begin by seeing how quickly it is lured by threat and novelty. Begin by observing how it clings to what hurts, because what hurts feels significant. Begin by realizing that significance is not the same as truth. The temple is still dark. The dawn has not arrived, but you're holding the torch now. And the first thing that torch reveals is not the world. It reveals the one who has been aiming it. And once you see that, the old life starts to feel like a dream you're waking up from, slowly, blinking, realizing the room was always here, and the only thing that changed was what you chose to illuminate. Once you notice attention as a spotlight, you start noticing something even stranger. The spotlight doesn't just shine and move on. It leaves residue. It leaves a faint imprint, like oil from a fingertip on glass. And when you touch the same place again and again, the glass stops looking like glass. It starts looking like a story. This is the part that feels almost unfair when you first see it. Your mind is not only experiencing life, it is recording it, editing it, and then replaying it back to you as if it were the whole truth. There's a scribe inside you, endlessly writing, endlessly underlining, endlessly making certain lines darker than others. If Thoth is the cosmic scribe, then each person carries a private copy of him, an inner registrar of reality. And that inner scribe is always listening for one thing, what you keep paying attention to, because what you attend to becomes what you remember. What you remember becomes what you expect. What you expect becomes what you interpret. And what you interpret becomes what you choose. This isn't philosophy floating in the clouds. This is the machinery of a human life. Think about the last time you learned a new word. At first, it was invisible. The word existed in the world, but it didn't exist in your perception. Then you heard it once, and suddenly you began hearing it everywhere. On a podcast, in a conversation, in a headline. It didn't multiply overnight. Your attention had simply created a new doorway. The inner scribe wrote it into your dictionary, and now the world could speak it to you. That's how beliefs work too. A belief is not always a loud sentence like, I am unworthy. Often it's softer, almost silent. People leave. Success is for other people. If I relax, something will go wrong. I have to prove myself. Nothing ever changes. You might not even know you believe these things. But the inner scribe knows, because the inner scribe is not measuring what you say. You can say anything. The inner scribe measures what you rehearse. And rehearsal is attention with repetition. This is why two people can live through the same event and walk away with different lives. The event is the same, but the scribe's ink is different. One person circles the lesson and grows. The other person circles the wound and shrinks. One person's attention writes, "This hurt, and I survived." Another's writes, "This hurt, and it will happen again." Same night, same rain, same argument, same loss, different inner records. So your life begins to look like your notes. Now here's where Thoth's sharpness comes in again, because he would not allow you the comfort of thinking your inner scribe is neutral. A scribe always chooses. Even choosing what to omit is a choice. The mind cannot record everything. It has to select, and it selects based on what feels important. But important is often decided by emotion, not truth. Pain feels important. Threat feels important. Shame feels important. Novelty feels important. These things flare like torches. They demand attention. They make the scribe's hand move quickly, scribbling in thick strokes, as if the page might vanish. Meanwhile, quiet goodness can pass unnoticed. A kind gesture, a small win, a moment of calm, a lesson learned. These are subtle. They don't shout. The scribe can miss them if you don't train the eye to look. And what the scribe misses doesn't become part of your lived reality. Not because it didn't happen, but because it didn't become yours. This is why some people live in a world full of enemies. They are not necessarily surrounded by enemies. Their scribe has simply learned to record slights as if they were attacks, and to ignore kindness as if it were a trick. Other people live in a world full of opportunity. They are not necessarily luckier. Their scribe has learned to underline openings instead of obstacles. The scribe is not fate. The scribe is practice. And practice is where the hidden ink begins to reveal itself. Hidden ink is what you're writing without noticing you're writing it. It's the background script that runs while you believe you're just being yourself. It's the subtle narration you carry, the tone you give to your own existence. Some people's hidden ink is harsh. Not good enough, not fast enough, not smart enough. Some people's hidden ink is suspicious. They'll disappoint me. Some people's hidden ink is hopeless. What's the point? Some people's hidden ink is hungry. More, more, more. And some people, even if they've suffered, carry hidden ink that is strangely luminous. I will find my way. You can detect your hidden ink by listening to what your attention returns to when you are alone. When nothing is demanding you, where does your mind drift? When you wake in the night, what story rises first? When you sit in silence, what image insists on being seen? When you look into the future, what scenes do you automatically paint? This is the inner scribe flipping pages. And the more often a page is opened, the easier it becomes to open it again. That's the real trap. The scribe isn't only writing reality. It's creating grooves, pathways, habits of perception. If you repeatedly attend to rejection, your mind becomes a rejection detector. If you repeatedly attend to mistakes, your mind becomes an error scanner. If you repeatedly attend to beauty, your mind becomes a beauty finder. The brain is an apprentice to attention. You can feel this in the body. Notice how quickly your posture changes when you focus on a fear. Shoulders tighten, breath shortens, heart rate shifts. The scribe writes in the nervous system, not just the mind. Your body becomes a margin note. Over time, your body begins to anticipate the script before you consciously think it. That's when people say, "I don't know why I feel this way." They do know, somewhere deeper. The scribe knows. The ink is hidden, but it's still ink. This is why spiritual traditions treated attention as sacred discipline. They weren't being dramatic. They were being accurate. If your attention is constantly kidnapped, then your inner scribe is not writing your life. Someone else is. Something else is. The loudest voices, the sharpest fears, the brightest distractions, they become your authors. And then you wake up one day and think, how did I become this person? You became the person your attention trained you to be. Thoth's lesson becomes almost audible here. Imagine him leaning over your shoulder, not as a judge, but as a precise observer. He sees the page. He sees the repeated phrases. He sees the loops of thought you call normal, and he doesn't shout. He simply points. He draws a line under what you keep writing. Then he asks, without sentimentality, "Is this what you meant to write?" Because most people don't mean to write the lives they are living. They mean well. They dream. They plan. They want healing and love and purpose. But their attention, left untrained, keeps writing the old script. The scribe keeps returning to familiar ink because familiar ink feels safe, even if it's painful, even if it's limiting. There's a strange comfort in what you already know how to suffer. And this is the hidden irony. The mind can become loyal to its own prisons. It can become devoted to the story of being trapped because that story explains everything. It removes responsibility. It gives identity. It says, "This is just who I am." But Thoth is the god of measurement, and measurement dissolves excuses. Measurement says, "Show me the evidence of your focus." Not your intentions, not your affirmations, your focus. And here's the good news, the kind that doesn't sound like a pep talk because it is grounded. The scribe can learn new handwriting. You cannot erase every old line. Something's happened. Some ink is permanent. But you can stop tracing the same sentence until it becomes the only sentence you can see. You can begin to write new lines beside the old ones. You can add footnotes. You can add context. You can add truth where the old script was only pain. This is how people heal without denying what happened. Healing is not pretending the old page is blank. Healing is refusing to let the old page be the entire book. So how do you start? Not with forcing yourself to think positive all day. That becomes another prison, another harsh ink. I must be happy or I'm failing. No, the scribe hates lies. Thoth hates lies. The psyche hates lies. Lies don't heal. They rot in secret. You start by learning to distinguish between what is happening now and what is being replayed. A thought appears. They don't respect me. Is it happening now, in this moment? Or is it a memory wearing a mask? Another thought appears. I'm going to mess this up. Is it a prophecy or an old wound speaking? Another. I'll never get out of this. Is it a fact or a habit? Each time you ask, you're lifting the ink to the light. And once ink is visible, it becomes editable. The next step is subtle. You begin feeding the scribe different evidence. You direct attention to moments that contradict the old script, not as denial, but as balance. If your mind is trained to notice rejection, you begin noticing acceptance. Not grand acceptance, just small signals. A friend responding, a stranger smiling, your own capacity to rest. If your mind is trained to notice danger, you begin noticing safety. The locked door, the steady breath, the morning sun, the fact that right now, in this moment, you are okay. At first it will feel fake because the old script is louder. The old ink is thicker, but that's only because it has been traced so many times. You're not trying to erase it. You're trying to stop making it darker. And as you do, something strange begins to happen. The inner scribe slows down. The frantic need to interpret everything relaxes. The world becomes less like a courtroom and more like a landscape. You start seeing nuance. You start seeing possibility. You start hearing your own life without the constant commentary. This is where the ancient and the psychological meet perfectly. Attention is the gateway to freedom because attention is the gateway to authorship. If you can reclaim the scribe, you can reclaim the story. Not by inventing a fantasy, but by letting truth become wider than your wounds. And as this section closes, you may feel the question rising again, sharper now. If attention is the spotlight, and the inner scribe is the one who records wherever the light falls, then what forces keep dragging the light away from what matters? What creatures, what habits, what serpents coil around the beam and whisper, "Look here, look here, look here"? Because if you're going to live deliberately, you have to recognize the thieves. You can feel them before you can name them. They don't arrive like villains in a story. They arrive like urges, like little tugs on the sleeve of the mind, like an itch you can't stop scratching. And the strange thing is how reasonable they sound. They don't say, "Destroy your life." They say, "Just check." They say, "Just make sure." They say, just one more. They say, you deserve this. They say, you can focus later. In the old languages, the forces that pull a person from their center were often pictured as serpents. Not because snakes are evil, but because serpents move quietly. They coil in silence. They strike fast. And once you're hypnotized by the motion, you forget you were ever walking in a straight line. Distraction is not just losing time. It is losing the thread of your own being. And if attention is a torch, distraction is the wind that keeps turning your wrist until you can't remember what you were trying to see. The first serpent is the easiest to recognize, but the hardest to resist. Novelty. Novelty is not bad. It's part of how humans learn. But novelty becomes a serpent when it trains you to need stimulation in order to feel alive. It teaches your attention to skip like a stone across water, touching everything, entering nothing. You begin mistaking interesting for meaningful. You begin feeding on newness the way a starving person feeds on sugar. Quick energy, no nourishment. In modern life, novelty is engineered. It is packaged. It is sold to you. It is delivered to your pocket with perfect timing. And the more you consume it, the more your mind learns a cruel lesson. Stillness is empty. So when you sit down to do anything sacred, create, heal, study, pray, listen, love, stillness rises like a wall. And the serpent whispers, this is boring. This is pointless. This is too slow. But slow is where your life actually happens. Your nervous system does not transform at the speed of a swipe. Your character does not mature at the speed of a headline. Your destiny does not unfold at the speed of a notification. The most real things, the kind that shape the soul, move with the pace of roots in earth, not sparks in air. The serpent of novelty hates roots. It wants you weightless, because a weightless person can be moved. The second serpent is urgency. Urgency is the feeling that something needs your attention right now, or else something terrible will happen. And again, sometimes urgency is real. Fires exist, deadlines exist, emergencies exist, but most urgency in modern life is theatrical. It is a mood you're trained into, a permanent red alert that keeps your system aroused, vigilant, tense. Why is this so dangerous? Because urgency makes you easy to steer. If your mind is always in a rush, it cannot see clearly. It cannot measure. It cannot choose with wisdom. It reacts. It grabs. It retreats. It apologizes. It attacks. It becomes a puppet of the next loud thing. Urgency is a spell that says, there is no time. But the truth is, urgency often wastes more time than it saves. It fractures attention into shallow fragments, and shallow fragments cannot build a deep life. The inner scribe starts writing in panic handwriting, and panic handwriting becomes your default script. The third serpent is the most intimate, emotion as compass. This one is tricky because emotion is sacred. Emotion carries information. Emotion is energy. Emotion is the language of the body. But when emotion becomes your compass, it doesn't guide you toward truth. It guides you toward intensity. If you only follow what you feel in a moment, you will become addicted to moods. You will chase pleasure and avoid discomfort, even when discomfort is the doorway to growth. You will avoid conversations that could heal because they feel awkward. You will abandon dreams that require patience because patience feels slow. You will sabotage relationships because vulnerability feels dangerous. And the serpent whispers, if it doesn't feel good, it's wrong. But that's not wisdom. That's the nervous system trying to stay familiar. Emotion is weather. You don't build a temple on weather. You build it on ground. Thoth would never tell you to ignore motion. He would tell you to measure it, to learn its pattern, to understand what it is pointing to, and also what it is exaggerating. A measured emotion becomes a teacher. An unmeasured emotion becomes a tyrant. The fourth serpent is identity. This one is beautiful and terrifying because identity doesn't feel like distraction. Identity feels like you. It says, this is who I am. It says, this is what people like me do. It says, this is what I deserve. It says, this is what is possible for me. It says, this is what I will never be. And the more you stare at identity, the more it hardens. But identity is supposed to be a tool, not a cage. It's a way of organizing your life, not a way of limiting your future. Yet the serpent of identity makes your attention obsess over self-image. How you look, how you appear, how you're judged, how you compare. It makes you narrate your life as a performance. And when life becomes performance, attention becomes surveillance. You're no longer living. You're monitoring yourself living. That is exhausting. That is why people feel tired even when they rest. They're carrying a camera crew inside their head. They're editing themselves in real time. They're anticipating criticism before it arrives. The inner scribe is no longer writing a scroll of wisdom. It's writing a script for applause. Thoth's lesson cuts right through this. The scribe does not care how you appear. The scribe cares what you practice. The scribe cares what you repeat. The scribe cares what you become when no one is watching. Now there is a fifth serpent, and this one is ancient. Older than algorithms. Older than modern urgency. Older than the self-help industry. It is the serpent of unresolved pain. Unresolved pain doesn't just hurt. It pulls. It pulls your attention back to the scene, back to the memory, back to the wound, as if your mind believes that replaying it enough times will finally produce a different ending. This is why people ruminate, why they rehearse arguments they'll never have, why they relive humiliations from years ago, why they build entire inner theaters where the past keeps happening. The serpent doesn't say, stay stuck. It says, solve it. It says, understand it. It says, protect yourself. And sometimes, yes, you need to process pain. You need to understand. You need to grieve. But rumination is not processing. Rumination is the mind chewing a stone and calling it food. Processing moves. Rumination loops. And the longer you loop, the more your attention is chained to the past, and the more your life becomes a delayed reaction to something that already happened. The inner scribe keeps underlining the same sentence until it becomes a prophecy. This will happen again. People can't be trusted. I'm always alone. I'm always behind. I'm always too much or not enough. The serpent of pain is powerful because it uses something real as its bait. This is why reclaiming attention is not just a productivity trick. It is not just focus better. It is liberation work. It is spiritual work. It is psychological work. Because distraction is not only external. It is internal. It is the mind's learned habit of fleeing the present moment, because the present moment contains both power and responsibility. Here is the part people don't like to hear. Distraction often protects you from meeting your own life. If you sit still, you might feel grief you've been avoiding. If you turn off the noise, you might hear an inner truth you've been dodging. If you stop scrolling, you might realize you don't like the direction you're going. If you stop being busy, you might have to decide what you actually want. So the serpents are not only thieves. They're also guards, guarding the gate to your own depth. And that's why fighting them with brute force rarely works. If you try to discipline yourself with shame, you just create another serpent. Shame becomes another urgency, another identity, another loop. I'm weak. I can't focus. I am fading. Now your attention is trapped again, just in a different cage. Thoth's way is sharper and cleaner. He would teach you to recognize the serpents without becoming fascinated by them, to see their patterns without hating yourself for having them. Because hatred is still attention. Obsession is still devotion. Even fighting a serpent can become feeding it if you do it with frantic energy. So the first move is recognition. You catch the moment the serpent appears. That split second when you feel the tug. That tiny impulse. Check, switch, avoid, snack, scroll, rehearse. You notice it as an event in consciousness, not as a command. This alone is powerful. The serpent thrives on unconsciousness. It thrives when you think you're the urge. But you're not the urge. You're the one who can watch the urge. That watcher is the beginning of sovereignty. And then comes the second move, understanding the serpent's promise. Every distraction promises something: relief, pleasure, safety, control, validation, escape. The promise is not always false. Sometimes it delivers a small version of it, but always demands a price: your continuity, your depth, your ability to stay with what matters. So you begin asking, gently but firmly, what is this urge trying to give me? If the urge is to check your phone, maybe it's trying to give you novelty. If the urge is to rehearse an old argument, maybe it's trying to give you control. If the urge is to avoid a task, maybe it's trying to give you safety. If the urge is to compare yourself, maybe it's trying to give you identity. If the urge is to stay busy, maybe it's trying to give you an excuse not to feel. When you name the promise, the spell weakens. The serpent loses some of its glamour, because now you can meet the need directly without feeding the pattern. And this is the turning point. You stop treating distraction as a moral failure and start treating it as misdirected intelligence. Your mind is trying to help you. It's just using old strategies. Thoth's lesson is not to crush the mind. It is to refine it, to teach it measurement, to teach it choice, to teach it that attention is not a toy. Because once you know the serpents, you can stop being surprised by them. You can stop thinking something is wrong with you when they appear. You can start preparing for the exact moments they strike, when you're tired, lonely, overwhelmed, bored, or afraid. And then, this is where the grandeur begins to rise again. You can begin turning attention not by force, but by ritual, by a deliberate practice that becomes stronger than impulse. A practice that doesn't just fight distraction, but trains the spotlight to return home. Because if attention is devotion, then redirecting attention is prayer. Not prayer as performance, but prayer as aim. And once you learn how to aim, you are no longer at the mercy of whatever hisses loudest in the dark. There's a moment, small, almost invisible, when the torch turns. It happens between impulse and action, between the hiss of the serpent and the first step toward it, between just check and the hand reaching for the phone, between just worry and the mind building another nightmare, between just avoid and the body drifting into numbness. That moment is so brief, most people never notice it. They think their life is made of big choices, dramatic decisions, turning points. But your life is made of these tiny hinges. And if Thoth is the measurer, then this is where he measures you. Not with judgment, with precision. He measures whether you can find a hinge, place your fingers on it, and turn. A ritual, in the deepest sense, is simply a repeated act that trains reality. Not reality out there, but reality in here, your nervous system, your perception, your attention. Ritual is how you teach the inner scribe new handwriting. It is how you train the spotlight to stay on what matters. And the reason it works is almost embarrassingly simple. Repetition is stronger than intention. So the question becomes, what repetition do you choose? Not as a list, not as a program, but as a living practice you can return to when the day pulls you apart. The first movement of this ritual is not forcing focus. It is returning to the body, because attention is not only in the mind. Attention is a whole organism phenomenon. When your body is scattered, your attention will scatter. When your breath is shallow, your mind will search for threat. When your posture collapses, your thoughts tend to collapse with it. Your biology is a silent partner in every spiritual practice you attempt. So you begin by learning the simplest spell, a breath that you actually feel. Not a dramatic meditation, not a performance. Just a breath that touches the rib cage, the belly, the throat. A breath that interrupts the trance. Because most distraction is trance. It is hypnosis by speed, hypnosis by emotion, hypnosis by repetition. Breath breaks hypnosis. It tells the nervous system, we are here. And here is the only place you can aim from. When the breath lands, you notice the next thing. Where is the torch pointed right now? This is the second movement, naming. Not naming with harshness, not naming to scold yourself. Naming like a scientist, like a priest, like an honest witness. My attention is in fear. My attention is in comparison. My attention is in resentment. My attention is in craving. My attention is in the past. My attention is in the future. The act of naming creates space. It's as if the inner scribe pauses mid-sentence and looks up. It's as if the serpent pauses because it's been seen. And in that pause, you can finally choose. Now choice needs direction. Without direction, attention simply bounces to the next shiny thing. So you offer the torch a destination. This is the third movement, selection. What matters now? Not what matters forever. Not your entire life plan. Right now, in this moment, what is the one thread you want to hold? Maybe it's the conversation in front of you. Maybe it's the work you said you would do. Maybe it's rest. Maybe it's being kind. Maybe it's staying with discomfort long enough to learn from it instead of fleeing it. Maybe it's paying attention to beauty for 30 seconds, so the inner scribe has different evidence. The destination must be real, concrete, simple. The mind loves vague ideals because vague ideals don't demand action. Be mindful is vague. Feel your feet on the floor for 10 seconds is real. Be confident is vague. Sit upright and finish this paragraph is real. Heal is vague. Tell the truth to yourself about what you're avoiding is real. When the destination is chosen, you do something that feels almost too small to count. You return. You return once. That's the fourth movement. And you will drift again. And you return again. And again. And again. This is the entire practice. People think meditation is emptying the mind. It isn't. Meditation is learning to return. Prayer is learning to return. Discipline is learning to return. Love is learning to return. Every sacred path, stripped of ornament, is the strengthening of return. Because the torch will wander. It will be pulled. That doesn't mean you failed. That is the training itself. The inner scribe learns by what you do next. If you drift into distraction and then punish yourself, the scribe writes, I am broken. If you drift into distraction and then gently return, the scribe writes, I can come back. That single difference, punishment versus return, changes the entire trajectory of a life over time. It changes your relationship with yourself. It changes the emotional climate of your mind. It turns the temple from a courtroom into a sanctuary. Now, there's a deeper level to this ritual, one that Thoth would respect because it involves language. Words are not decorations. Words are instructions to the mind. Words are the ink the scribe uses. Most people speak to themselves in a way they would never speak to someone they love. They bark orders. They ridicule. They predict failure. They rehearse humiliation. And then they wonder why their attention collapses. So part of redirecting the eye is redirecting the tone, especially the inner tone. You begin using phrases that don't lie, but don't poison. Instead of, I can't focus, which is a verdict, you shift to my attention is scattered right now. That's a measurement. It leaves room for change. Instead of, I always mess things up, you shift to, I'm afraid of messing this up. That reveals the real emotion. Instead of, I'm lazy, you shift to, I'm avoiding discomfort. That names the serpent without turning it into identity. This is not semantics. This is spellcraft. Because language shapes attention, and attention shapes experience. Thoth, as the scribe, would insist on accurate words. Not pretty words. Accurate, because inaccurate words become a crooked map. And a crooked map leads you to the wrong places no matter how hard you walk. Now, let's bring this out of the abstract and into the living day. There are certain moments when attention is most likely to be stolen. The thresholds, the transitions, waking up, going to bed, finishing a task, entering a social space, leaving one, waiting, feeling lonely, feeling criticized, feeling bored. In those moments, the mind hunts for an easy story. It hunts for stimulation. It hunts for control. It hunts for relief. So you build your ritual around thresholds. You don't wait until you're deep in the trance. You catch it at the doorway. Imagine waking up and not immediately feeding your attention to the world's noise. Imagine the first 60 seconds of your day belonging to you. The breath, the weight of your body, the simple acknowledgement. I am here. My torch is in my hand. Today I will aim it. That alone can change the tone of the whole day. Not magically, but mechanically. You're starting the scribe's page with intention instead of reaction. Or imagine before you open an app, you ask, what am I seeking? If you're seeking connection, can you text a real person instead? If you're seeking relief, can you take 3 breaths first? If you're seeking inspiration, can you choose a specific source rather than letting an algorithm choose for you? The ritual is not never use anything. The ritual is conscious entry. And then there's the ritual for emotional storms, which is where most people lose their torch entirely. When anger rises, when shame rises, when anxiety rises, the torch becomes a floodlight pointing everywhere at once. The mind wants to solve, fix, explain, attack, run. It wants to do anything except be with the raw sensation. So the ritual becomes incredibly simple. You stay with sensation for a short, honest window. You feel the heat. You feel the tightening. You feel the pressure. You let the wave move through without turning it into 100 thoughts. You are not suppressing emotion. You're letting it be what it is before it becomes a story. This is what it means to redirect the eye. You redirect it from narrative to presence. And presence is not passive. Presence is strength. Because when you can be present with discomfort without fleeing, you're no longer controllable by discomfort. The serpent loses one of its favorite levers. It can still hiss, but it can't steer you as easily. Over time, this becomes a kind of inner nobility. You develop a spine inside your attention. You develop patience. You develop a steadiness that doesn't depend on everything going your way. This is why the old spiritual paths spoke of mastery. Not mastery over others. Mastery over the self. Mastery over the wandering eye. But there is one more element, and it is vital. Devotion needs a North Star. If you only practice returning in random directions, you may become calmer but still feel empty. The torch needs something worthy to illuminate. Your attention is sacred. It wants to be used for something meaningful. So you choose a few anchors, living anchors. An anchor can be of value. Truth, compassion, courage, craftsmanship. An anchor can be a practice. Writing, walking, studying, prayer, making art. An anchor can be a relationship you want to show up for with presence. An anchor can be a vision of the person you're becoming, not as a fantasy, but as a direction. Then, when the day pulls you, you return not just to breath, but to the anchor. This is where attention becomes destiny, because the anchors you return to become the structures of your life. And slowly, almost quietly, your inner scribe starts writing a different book. Not because you forced yourself into perfection, but because you trained the simplest sacred act, turning back to what matters, turning back to what is real, turning back to your own chosen path when the serpents offer you endless side roads. And in time, you begin to feel something that is difficult to describe until you've tasted it. A life that is continuous. A life that feels like it belongs to you. Not because it is free of pain, but because it is not constantly being stolen. The torch is steadier now. The temple is less dark. And you are ready for the final movement, the one that makes all of this more than inner work. Because sustained attention doesn't just calm you. It reshapes your consequences. It changes what you attract, what you build, what you become. It writes your fate in a handwriting that finally looks like yours. At first, reclaiming attention feels like an inner thing. Private, quiet, almost invisible to everyone else. You breathe, you name, you return, you choose. No one applauds. No one awards you a crown for turning your torch away from the serpent and back toward what matters. But life is always keeping score. Not in a cruel way, in a lawful way, in the same way gravity keeps score, in the same way seasons keep score, in the same way a seed keeps score of sunlight and water. If you place your attention somewhere often enough, the world begins to organize around that placement, because you begin to organize around it. Your choices start to align. Your tolerances shift. Your standards change. The people you keep close change. The opportunities you notice change. Even your sense of time changes, because time feels different when it is not constantly broken into fragments. This is the crown path, consequence that accumulates like a slow, majestic architecture. And the crown is not given by a king. It is forged by repetition. Think about the simplest example. A person places attention on their craft, writing, music, building, teaching, any honest work. At first, nothing dramatic happens. They sit down and do it again and again. They're bored sometimes. They're frustrated sometimes. They doubt themselves. The serpent hisses, "You're not good enough." Novelty whispers, "Do something else." Urgency screams, "You have no time." Identity mutters, "Who do you think you are?" But the person returns. And one day, without fanfare, they realize they have become someone else. Someone who can do what they could not do before. Their hands are steadier. Their mind is clearer. Their taste is sharper. Their skill has grown. Not because they were gifted by the universe, because they directed attention long enough for reality to respond. This is not only about craft. This is about character. A person who places attention on truth becomes more truthful, not as a moral badge, but as a nervous system shift. Their body begins to reject lies because lies feel heavy. A person who places attention on compassion becomes more compassionate. They begin noticing suffering without being overwhelmed by it. A person who places attention on courage becomes braver, not because fear disappears, but because fear no longer decides. You become what you practice attending to. That is the crown. And this is where Thoth's presence feels the most alive, because Thoth is not only the scribe, he is the one who weighs the heart. In the old mythic imagination, the heart is weighed against truth, not against perfection, not against appearances, against truth. Your attention is the weight you put on the scale. It is easy to say you value love. It is easy to say you value freedom. It is easy to say you value growth. But what do you attend to? What do you feed? What do you rehearse? What do you keep returning to? That is what the scale reads. And if that sounds harsh, notice the other side of it. It means your life is not as random as it feels. It means you're not simply doomed to repeat what happened to you. It means you have a lever that is always within reach. Attention. Now, the crown path also reveals something else. The world is not only shaped by your attention, but by the attention of others. This is why certain environments feel like fog. Certain people feel like storms. Certain places feel like noise. You walk into them and your torch starts twitching, pulled by their urgency, their drama, their demands. When your attention is untrained, you become a public space. Anyone can enter. When your attention is trained, you become a sanctuary. Entry has a cost. This isn't about becoming cold or detached. It's about becoming selective. It's about understanding that attention is intimacy. And intimacy, in any sacred tradition, is not given to everything. It is offered to what is worthy of it. So consequences begin to appear in your relationships. You stop feeding arguments that go nowhere. You stop rewarding manipulation with frantic attention. You start listening with depth to the people you love. You start being present enough that you actually hear what they're saying, not just the words, but the need beneath the words. You start noticing when you're performing and when you're real. You start noticing when you're using distraction to avoid closeness. And slowly, relationships change. Not because you controlled others, but because you stopped offering your most precious resource to patterns that degrade you. Your attention becomes a boundary. Then consequences begin to appear in your inner world. Your memory shifts. This is one of the strangest gifts. When you stop underlining the same painful lines, the past begins to loosen its grip. The events remain, but the emotional glue weakens. The inner scribe starts recording more than pain. It starts recording resilience. It starts recording tenderness. It starts recording the moments you returned. And the mind begins to trust you. That's a huge line. So feel it. The mind begins to trust you. Most people's minds don't trust them because they abandon themselves constantly. They promise, "I'll take care of you." Then they numb. They promise, "I'll change." Then they revert. They promise, "I'll rest." then they scroll. They promise, "I'll be honest," then they hide. No wonder the mind is anxious. No wonder the nervous system is restless. It is living with someone unreliable, the self. But when you practice returning again and again, your inner system begins to relax because it starts to believe you will come back. You will steer. You will choose. You will not leave it alone in the storm. This is a spiritual achievement, even if no one calls it that. And then, yes, consequences begin to appear in what people call manifestation, though that word has been abused. The truth is less flashy and more sacred. When your attention stabilizes on meaningful aims, you become coherent. And coherence has gravity. Coherence attracts. Coherence signals. Coherence makes you visible to the right people and invisible to certain kinds of chaos. You start showing up consistently. You start creating outputs. You start taking steps. You start noticing openings. You start acting in alignment with your values. From the outside, it looks like luck. From the inside, it feels like inevitability. Because you're no longer scattering your life force across 1,000 small urgencies. You are gathering it. Gathered attention is power. And power, in the spiritual philosophical sense, is the ability to bring your inner world and outer world into alignment. Now, the crown path has one final test. The test is not whether you can focus when life is easy. Anyone can. The test is whether you can hold the torch steady when life is uncertain. When someone disappoints you, when you fail, when you feel lonely, when you are tempted to numb, when the old story rises like a ghost and says, "See, nothing changes." In those moments, reclaiming attention becomes a sacred act of defiance. Not defiance against the world, but against the part of you that wants to surrender the pen. You breathe, you name, you return, and you remember your life goes where your attention goes. Not in one day, not in one dramatic leap, but in the slow, majestic way rivers choose their direction. In a way stone is shaped by water. In a way a crown is forged by pressure and time. If you keep returning, your life becomes less accidental, less reactive, less like a series of interruptions. It becomes authored. And that is the real esoteric meaning of Thoth's lesson. The lesson is not merely focus to succeed. The lesson is attention is the creative intelligence through which the soul writes itself into time. You are not here merely to survive. You are here to become. So, as the temple brightens, stone warming under the first hint of dawn, imagine Thoth standing in the distance, not as a mythological character, but as a principle, clarity, precision, authorship, the inner scribe, the measurer, the one who refuses fog. He does not demand perfection. He demands honesty. He demands that you see what you're doing with your torch. And then, with a quiet, almost merciful sharpness, he offers you the simplest, most regal invitation. Aim. Aim again. Aim once more. And let the consequences build into a life that finally feels like it belongs to the one holding the light. Let the last words settle like dust in a sunbeam. Not as an idea you agree with, but as something you can actually feel in your body. Your attention is moving right now. Even as you listen, it's already choosing what to highlight, what to ignore, what to hold, what to release. And that means the teaching isn't waiting for tomorrow. It's happening in this exact moment. So don't leave this as inspiration. Make it small. Make it real. After this ends, notice the first place your mind tries to rush. The first urge to check, to jump, to feed the old hunger for noise. Just notice it. No fight, no shame. Then take one honest breath and aim again. Aim at your feet on the floor. Aim at the light in the room. Aim at the next single task you can do with care. Aim at one person you can treat with presence. Aim at the thought that actually helps instead of the thought that only hurts. This is how a life changes without drama. Not through one heroic moment, but through a quiet loyalty to the direction you choose. The torch turns. The inner scribe adjusts his hand. A different line is written. Then another. Then another. And one day you look back, and realize the path under your feet is not an accident. It's a record. If you've been scattered, you can come back. If you've been lost in old stories, you can write a new sentence beside them. If you've been feeding serpents, you can stop, not by force, but by remembering what your attention is for. Because where your attention goes, your life goes. And the one holding the light is you.